Welcome back, guys. Cerwin-Vega Museum channel on YouTube. Until I can get my real setup up and going and we can do tests and we can do all kinds of shit, I'm gonna have to make some videos based on what I've been asked and what I see can maybe be an issue. So I can give at least my 2 cents on it. Amplifiers is always a topic that comes up when you have speakers like Cerwin-Vega, because you have to understand that all type of speakers needs a good amp. But of course, if you have like $25 pair of Sanyo or Akai speakers, you're not going to go and spend a lot of money on an amp. You can probably do with whatever you have. Even a receiver of sorts will do you good just to get some sound. But when we start talking about aftermarket speakers and specialty speakers and speakers that are in a certain category, we're talking about like high end and the mid-fi's and the stereo speakers in general. You have different categories, and you have to kind of ask yourself, where do Cerwin-Vega fall in? Well, Cerwin-Vega fall into the category of aftermarket hi-fi speakers. They're not high-end by any means, not most of them, and but that doesn't mean anything right now, because what it means is we know that high-end speakers deserves and need and demand good quality amps. You just have to have it. They don't sound good unless you have a good amp hooked up to it. And when I say a good amp, I mean that has the power supply, that has the cooling system, that has the muscles behind it, and is built with that in mind, that this is going to be high-end and high-end reproduction of sound. So there is different amps out there, and Cerwin-Vega is still not a high end, but they still demand a lot from an amplifier. So that's why most people who know Cerwin-Vega do not just recommend whatever. Don't hook them up to like a 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 amp receiver, because you're never going to get the full potential out of the speaker. Most Cerwin-Vega speakers, and I'm saying most because if we exclude the 70s, the HED lines and the smaller bookshelf speakers, they have a different need. But if you look at the bigger size speakers from Cerwin-Vega with 12 inches and 15-inch woofers and 3-ways and in some cases 4-ways build up, they will need a good amp. And for a long period of time, well, as long as I can remember, in fact, if we go back 25, 30, 35, 40 years, I have always tried, maybe not in the beginning because it was like a budget thing, but when you were an early teen or late teen, you kind of had to do what you had to do to get by. But of course, when you started to get some means between your fingers and you start to get some financial room, I have always been of that thinking that the better I have it to push the speakers, the better system that I have built up in front of the speakers, the better the speakers are going to sound. And I'm not alone having that philosophy. So I have always tried to have a great CD player. I was using, of course, when back in the days, 80s, I was using CD, I was using cassettes, and I was using LPs. So I was using all kinds of three. But of course, as time went on, I phased out the tapes. They were the first to go. And then the LPs went. And the LPs went because of, it wasn't like, it didn't fit into my lifestyle, because a lot of my music, late 80s, early 90s, most of my CDs traveled with me in and out. I used it at home, and then I used it in the car, and back and forth. So having a full setup of LPs and stuff didn't fit my lifestyle, and I think that CD sounds better. So I always try to have the best CD player I can have, and the best interconnect cables between the CD player and the amp that I can, because you want to try and minimize noise from outside to interfere with the sound. And so my amps have always been of good quality. I never had a $50,000 amp. I've never gone that far, but I'm gonna say the most expensive amp that I bought was, I didn't buy it new, I bought it used, but the new price on it was, I think it was back then, $5,900, and that was pretty much back then in that time frame. So I've always tried to do better on the amp side. Of course, I have my favorites, and I'm going to share them here, and I'm going to tell you if you are thinking about getting amps or you need. I see a lot of people ask about amps, so that's why I'm making this video. I have maybe 2 handfuls of favorite amplifiers that I have used up through the years. Some because they perform good for a great price, and some are because they perform the best and the price is not a question. I don't look at the price when I get those. And then you have those in the between where they're just good value for money. So let's look at I probably have 10. I can start with one. I can just list them down. I don't know how many I have right now, but there's certain brands that I prefer. So the first brand that I want to look into, and it doesn't go far away from the source. Since we're talking about Cerwin-Vega, I have to say that the Cerwin-Vega, the old Cerwin-Vega amps, not the new stuff that came out in the aftermath of Cerwin-Vega being sold and all that stuff, and they started making pro audio amplifiers. They had the power, but they are limited, and I don't like them. Never been a big fan of those. But the Cerwin-Vega amps from the 60s and 70s, and some of them in the 80s, they also went under the name Metron. So I like the Cerwin-Vega and the Metron amps. Those are absolutely, if you go with them, you can't go wrong. The only problem with them is that they're probably right now in this time, because they're becoming really old, you probably should do a full service and recap and go through the amp completely. So on top of the purchasing price, you have to set aside at least, if you buy one, you have to set aside at least $800 to $900 for service, if not more. So let's say $1,000 in service and recapping and all that, just to make sure it works perfectly. If you have to do major repairs, stay away and find another one. So Cerwin-Vega and Metron amps are absolutely a favorite. I like those amps. They have shit tons of power. Maybe not the most refined sounding amplifier that you can get, but they do the job if you want punch and power and control over your speakers. And they're a good fit for most Cerwin-Vega speakers. Maybe not the smaller ones, but the big ones. So Cerwin-Vega and Metron amps, absolutely on my list of favorite speakers, amplifiers. The next one on my list is Carver. And I will also lump in there with Carver. I will lump in Phase Linear, because they're about the same. So Phase Linear and Carver is about the same. They come from the same dude, same philosophy, and blah blah blah. I like Carver and Phase Linear. I used mostly Carver because it was easier to find. And I say between those two, you probably should go with Carver, because there's less problems, there's less maintenance, there's less things you have to think about. So Carver absolutely is a good fit for most Cerwin-Vega speakers and subwoofers. They have a range of series. Some series are more suitable for the small to medium-sized Cerwin-Vega, and some of the models are more suited for the bigger Cerwin-Vegas. You can't go wrong if you do the PM and the PXS or the PX series. Those are really, really good. The PT series is awesome. And they have other series too that are really good. So Carver has, even though they are a pro audio amp, they have very, very good sound and the sound quality is really good. I am a very big fan of the PT, but I'm also a huge fan of the PM series, because the PM series doesn't have the fans, so you don't have the problem with the noise from the fans running. And that's often a problem with pro audio amps, that you have these fans. And I tell you, some pro audio amps are really freaking loud, and some of these fans can also kind of drag the whole experience down on listening to music, especially if you're listening to it on normal listening levels. So Carver is absolutely a brand on my list. The next one on my list is Parasound. I have used Parasound many times. HCA. I used the many other different. There was like, I think one was like 75 or 80 watt per channel. I used them on some smaller L series speakers, and they sounded just perfect. I used 100, I think it was either 100 or 125 watt per channel Parasound amplifiers on some HED 1230, and that was a magnificent, amazing sound. Amazing. It was like warm. It was very detailed. On the bigger Cerwin-Vegas, I used the big 225 watt or 250 watt. It was the big boy. I don't remember the name of it, because this was like way back in the 90s. 90s, early 2000, I think it was. So that's like 25 years ago. And I had them for a brief while. I had the Parasounds for 6 months, I think it was. And then I got the chance to buy an electric company, so I kind of like switched over to that. Parasound is an amazing amplifier brand, based on John Curl's design philosophy, and they sound really good. And they have always been a little bit budget friendly hi-fi. High end, they're knocking on the door to high end. They're like a hybrid between hi-fi and high end, and you can't go wrong if you come across a good working quality, good working condition Parasound. Absolutely jump on it. They're good amps. They're really good amps. Now, for smaller Cerwin-Vega speakers, and when I say smaller, I mean smaller. When we talk about the two-way 6.5 and a tweeter, the two-way tweeter with a 7-inch mid or an 8-inch mid or an 8-inch woofer, there's a brand, if you want to be on the affordable side, called Audio Source. It was made by Phoenix Gold. Phoenix Gold bought them out and started building them. They are extremely good for small to medium-sized speakers. They won't do the job on the bigger ones. They have a model that is like 250 or 300 watt per channel. That one will do good job, but it's not as good as other 250, 300 watt amplifiers, because it doesn't have the same control, I feel. It's kind of like in the realm of NAD, but they're a little bit better than NAD. But I feel that the Audio Source by Phoenix Gold is extremely well if you use them on like the old HED series with like a tweeter in the mid-range, not 8-inch woofers, 10-inch woofer, something like that, in that range, and you're not depending on high power. Then the Audio Source is very good. So they are a brand that I can recommend, and they're a favorite of mine for many speakers. I used to use 75 watt per channel. I think 50 watt per channel on some AT8, the 2-inch with the two-way with the 8-inch, and that was fairly okay. It was totally okay. And then I bumped up to the 150 watt Audio Source, and it did the job amazingly. So Audio Source, yeah, if you use them on smaller speakers, of course, you're good to go. Now, another brand that I really like is, and I don't like all of them, but I like some of them. It's Crown, the Microtech and the Macrotech. The old amplifiers, once again, the same as Carver. If you can find them in good condition, jump on them. They're freaking awesome. Maybe not the best sounding speaker in sound quality and details and stuff like that, But if you're requiring power and you want to drive a pair of big speakers from Cerwin-Vega, you have some Pro Audio speakers or some dual 15s, or maybe you have several pairs that you want to do in parallel or whatever, because these Macrotechs are stable down to 2 ohm stereo, so you can load them up pretty darn good. So those are the brand that I can recommend, but I don't recommend all Crown amps because they have made some duds also. So be careful. Microtech and Macrotech is absolutely two amplifiers from Crown that I recommend and I like. Beside that, now I'm going to go some more into more hi-fi and high-end, and this is where the rest of my list is going to be. If you can find, these are extremely hard to find outside of Norway. I doubt you will find them. You might be find one here and one there, special import something. But now I'm not going to even include them. They're a favorite of mine, but they're only like for Norwegian people, and even in Norway they're hard to find. They're called Dynamic Precision, but you know what? They're just top of the line in every category. But they're so freaking hard to find. Even in Norway they are. And if you find them, you have to find the right service technician to take care of them if there's something wrong. But right now, Electric Company bought out Dynamic Precision some years ago, so maybe it's easier now. But I'm not going to make that a big thing. But if you can find a Dynamic Precision and you live in Norway, go for it. The next, since I'm on that topic, why not just go with the next one? Electric Company. This is maybe my biggest favorite amp manufacturer in the world. They're located in Norway. It was started by Per Abrahamsen back in the day, and they made some amazing stuff ever since the beginning. Stable and robust as shit. I mean, it is, you can throw rocks at it and it still goes on. Sound quality is extremely good, and there was a reason why Michael Jackson chose Electric Company to use those amplifiers in the studio when he was recording and mixing several of his albums. Among them was Dangerous, and they also used it on a little bit on Bad, but Dangerous was the one album that they used completely Electric Company for recording and mixing, because they had the highest sound quality that they could find. That's a testament. Their AW series is awesome. They have DACs, they have preamps, they have CD players, they have everything you want. Pricey? Yes, pricey. They have some really cool mono blocks called the Nemo, which is probably my favorite mono blocks ever made that I have ever heard. And I've heard quite a bit of different amplifier brands up through the years. So Electric Company is probably on the top of my list. Beside that, Krell is an amplifier brand that I like, that I can recommend. They are awesome as well, right behind Electric Company. If you can find some of the older amplifiers from a Canadian company called Classe, those are good. They had some issues a few years back or a decade ago or so, but if you get the older stuff and you get it serviced and you get the green light from a service technician, absolutely Classe can be a good brand. Also a little bit on the pricier side as for Krell and Electric Company. The next one on my list is also another Norwegian brand called Hegel. They make good stuff. They do most of their stuff in Norway, but they have outsourced the assembly and production to Asia. But everything is done. Prototypes are built in Norway. They are doing everything in Norway. They have a huge office in Norway with a huge research and development office. And so that's a good brand with good products. They are right behind Electric Company in quality. And they're not quite as good as Electric Company in my mind, but they're right behind. Beside those brands, there's a few other brands that I really, really like. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with Mundal and Aragon. They were a brand that was made up on the west coast of the United States. I think it was Seattle, or we see there in Portland, Seattle, or was it somewhere in Washington? It was up there in that area. Not, I think they were up around there. They, I'm not sure if they're still in business. I'm not sure. I haven't been looking for them either. But back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, they had some really cool models. They had some really good sounding amplifiers, and they were not like the as expensive as Krell, but a little bit more on the affordable side. But they had really good power. They had really good sound quality. Maybe it's a little bit more of a risk, because I don't know if there's any service centers around, because you have to remember, any of the AA amps that I'm talking about now are going back in time, so you probably will at some point in time, if you go for one of these, you probably need to have them serviced. So just keep that in mind, because the amps we're talking about now are easily 20, 25, 30, 35 years old, most of them. Of the newer stuff, there's a company on the market right now that I also really like, that I'm going to mention. So if you get any of these that I'm talking about, have talked about up until now, just keep in mind that you might have to do a service on them. Now let's look at two brands that I like that are currently being made. They are very relevant right now, and they're really good. One is a high-priced one. The other one is a very affordable one for high quality, and I really like this brand. But let's start with a more pricier one. PS Audio is a brand I like. I've heard their amps, and I really like what I heard. I heard them on some Focal speakers, and it was a good mix. And I have quite of an experience with listening to Focal speakers, because I used to have a pair of Focal myself. I loved it. I love their car audio stuff. Focal is very good. And when I have heard Focal with Electrocompagnia, I have heard Focal with Parasound, I've heard Focal with PS Audio, and probably the best one was the Electrocompagnia on that, but PS Audio was right behind. So PS Audio is absolutely a brand that I can recommend if you have a little bit of dough between your hands. And it's built in the United States. I think it's up in Colorado somewhere or something like that, I think it is. The other brand, I have been to their factory a couple of years ago. They are right here in Tennessee. They're called Emotiva. I love Emotiva. I love their speakers. I love their amps. I like everything they have. Everything that Emotiva puts out is, for me, really cool, and I like it. And the thing with Emotiva is that you can have it for a reasonable price. You can have it for a reasonable price. They have an amp that is like 250 and 300 watts that will do a job perfectly on most Cerwin-Vega. So if you ask me what amplifier is the best amplifier to use if I want power, control, sound quality, but I don't want to pay a fortune for it, I'll say you can get them used. You can buy them new for around $1,000, $1,000 to $1,200. You can get a brand new 300 watt amplifier. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. You can get them used. There's some people in my city where I live. They're selling now, easy used, a pair of Emotiva speakers. They have the preamp and the amp, the 300 watt amp, and they're selling all that for $800. Whoa! That is wild. So if you can find an Emotiva amp, go ahead. It's probably the best buy of an amp that you can buy that is fairly new, that you probably don't have to service or even worry about breaking down. And it gives you high quality sound. It gives you power. It gives you control. New technology. What are you waiting for? It's probably a better buy than all the other ones I told you about, because yes, I love the other brands, but age, technology, there will always be a need for service. You never know. You might hook it up today and it works, and you start playing, and then 3 weeks down the road, something happens. You don't have to worry about that with an Emotiva. And if you buy it new, you get warranty. So what's the problem? It's probably the best buy you can do today. Another brand that I would like to promote is Hafler. They maybe don't have the most powerful amplifiers, but Hafler makes really good quality, good sound quality. You can use them on those small to medium sized Cerwin-Vegas with awesome result. Awesome. Now, I know a lot of people is going to take this the wrong way, but I have to say at least, you know, there's two other brands. I don't recommend these for the big speakers, but I like them because you can get them for a good price. So it's all what you're looking for and all what you want to use them for. Rotel, once again, if you can get the older stuff, they have several models. They have one that is like, well, it's 250, 280, 300 watts, something like that. RB 1090 or something like that. I don't remember if that's the correct name. But the Rotel, I heard a lot of Rotel in the past when I was frequently going back and forth to these hi-fi stores down in Oslo, and there was, I think it was Oslo Hi-Fi Center who had Rotel, and I was there a lot, and I was listening to them, and I was like hanging out down there, and they did a fantastic job. Rotel can be used on the HED line, the smaller Cerwin-Vega, and if you get the big boy Rotel, you can even use that on the big speakers. But most of the Rotel amps, I would say up to 10 and 12 amp woofers. The 15 amps, you really have to have the big boy. Really good amp. Now, the one I'm going to mention now is, a lot of people are going to say, oh, no. I say no. But if you are in a penny pinch, let's say you don't have a lot of money, but you want to get started, this is better than nothing, okay? This is not a brand that I would recommend on regular basis. But let's say you are tight on funds. You have a pair of speakers. Let's say you have AT100, fairly easy to drive, and you need an amp. You maybe have limited, you have a couple of $100, $300 to spend on an amp. NAD, and I tell you, I don't recommend these for the most part, but if you are in a pitch, and you have the NADs or the NOD is okay to use on small Cerwin-Vega speakers. The HED line, which had like a power rating of 100, 150 watts, you know, the CH204, the CH203, the L9, the AT80 or 88, AT60, you know, perfectly fine. If you're gonna just have some sound, if you have, like, let's say you have an AT100 or AT15, and you can get an NAD or NOD 208, it's 200 plus watts per channel. It's probably the best NAD or the best NOD amp ever made, the 208. Absolutely. Then you have some other NOD models that are fairly okay. So if you're not looking for a party setup, but you just want to have a nice little setup in your living room, and I'm telling you, if your goal is not to play loud, but you want to play, you know, on a regular listening level, normal listening level, most of the NOD amps will do the job, but they will not do the job if you start to push them. They will sound a little bit anemic on the top end of things. You will understand that I feel I can push these speakers further. But, you know, I used, in my setup at some point, I had 4 NAD or NOD 216 THX stacked on top of each other, and I run them on D9, and I was running them on AT100 or AT15, and it was fairly good. But of course, when I took them out and I put in some Parasound in there, which I did, I replaced those NOD amps with Parasound. There was an arm and a leg difference in sound reproduction, and I could play much louder. I had much more control. But don't get me wrong, NAD for a budget setup, absolutely you can rock a budget setup with NAD. So, any other brands that I can recommend? Sure, there's many of them. But if you have some old Pro Audio amps and you want to use that, go ahead if it's powerful enough, if it's good quality. But stay away from all this China shit. That's all you have to think about. Stay away from this China shit. There is one honorable mention that I want to put in here. It's, well, should I or should I not? Because you really can't find them outside. They're so difficult to find. It's a brand called Crestron, and they are Brazilian made. And I used to be a dealer for them and a service center for them. And but they're so hard to find. They're it's all about power. It's not the best sounding amplifiers when it comes to sound quality, but God Almighty, do they have power? So those are more for the pro audio Cerwin-Vega, I feel. But there's of course other brands. Let me put it like this: if you find something like Ocuface, Pass Labs, Martin Logan, or Macintosh. Of course, they're all good amps. Don't get me wrong. Just because I didn't mention them now, they are good amps. There's plenty of good amps out there. Stay away from the cheap shit. Stay away from receivers. Stay away from Chinese amplifiers that are made like crap. And you will be good to go.